Okay, hi everyone. So this is my talk, Fixing Performance Problems with Someone Else's Toolbox. My name is Mike Croft, and I work for a company called C2B2. So we're independent Java middleware experts. So this talk really is pretty much just sort of like Tales from the front line. So it's based around one time when I went out to a customer who was just having performance problems. Now, generally what I would do in that situation is I've got a set of tools that I would use that I'm quite familiar with. I know how to work. I know how to get good, usable data from a system that's performing a bit badly. But in this case, there was problem after problem after problem, and each one of my tools was just completely useless for various different reasons. So I thought, well, actually all of us have got favorite tools and things that we know and understand very well. But what happens when the things that we normally rely on just aren't there anymore for whatever reason? Do we know what other alternatives are even available? I do think that we don't need to absolutely be aware of the ins and outs of every alternative, but I think it's useful to at least be aware of what else is out there to use. So I'm going to get through as many as possible in 15 minutes. It's not being recorded, so if you see something that you're not familiar with, snap a photo and you can look into it in a bit more detail later, because I won't be able to spend a huge amount of time on each. So, first things first is generally walk into the customer site and they say something like, "Help, the server is slow." And I say, "Well, okay, good. That's good to know. I need to know, well, what next?" So at this particular customer, they didn't actually have any insight at all into the system. They knew that a login was taking 45 seconds or so, but they didn't know particularly why. They just saw that they sent the request through, 45 seconds later something came back. They didn't know how long was spent in the database, how long was spent in the application server. There was a whole lot of information that they just didn't have. So, first step when you kind of as someone coming in from the outside looking into this sort of thing, it's very useful to start with live data. How is the server behaving right now? What can I see that's going on? So generally what I like to do is start there, see what I can find out using, hopefully, some graphical tools. Some of these might be familiar to some of you, maybe some others would be new. Do we all know JConsole? Yeah, that's a lot of hands, that's good. I would hope that most people that have spent a little bit of time with the JVM writing stuff for production would be aware of JConsole. So it gives you a lot of information about the memory, the heap usage, so you can see instantly, well, am I just running out of heap space? But it also gives you information on threads, and a really great lightweight way of looking at JMX mbeans, so we can see what's happening with connection pools. Am I just running out of threads to serve HTTP requests? Visual VM is something that, again, I would hope a lot of people are aware of by now. It's been around for a little while. I'd quite like it because it's a little bit more advanced than JConsole. We've got some quite nice plugins like the Visual GC one, which I'm quite fond of, which gives you a really good detailed view of the heap. But one of the things that I really like about Visual VM, which I find that not many people are really aware of, is you can just see on the left there, I've connected to a Payara micro server, but underneath I've got snapshots and a Tomcat snapshot. So what Visual VM does is you can connect it to a process, it will gather all this data, and well, yeah, this is live data, that's good, but you can then take an application snapshot to then be reloaded into Visual VM later and then do something more exciting with it. At least, analyze it when you've got a bit more time later. So the new one is Java Mission Control. Has everyone heard of Java Mission Control? Yeah, okay, that's good. It's a reasonable amount. So if JConsole is your kind of little Renault hatchback, Visual VM is your nice BMW saloon, Mission Control is more like your Formula One car. there is a huge amount of extra stuff that it does. It comes from BEA's JRocket, and Oracle made the fantastic decision of thinking, this is a great tool, let's integrate it into Hotspot. So it gives you a huge amount of extra thing. You can probably just see the tabs down the bottom. It gives you triggers, diagnostic commands, so that you can react to events that happen and gather a thread dump or some other kind of stack trace. So that's really good, really useful. So I went through this kind of thing with a customer and said, okay, we've got these tools, these nice graphical tools that I can use to, they're all on my laptop, so you don't need to have them, and then I just need to connect. All I need is an IP address and a JMX port number. And then, well, the problem there is that our firewalls are quite restrictive, so we don't actually open those ports. So that was a bit of a spanner in the works, really. But yeah, I'm a guy who likes to look for solutions, not problems. So, well, what we can do is just forward ports, and then we can connect through an SSH tunnel. So this is PuTTY. If you want to do this on Windows, Linux, you can do it on the command line natively. We can just set up a port forward thing so that I can connect to localhost 8686, which is the Glassfish JMX port, and then that'll just forward my request through a normal SSH thing, so it's just port 22, firewalls are fine. So that was okay, but the server doesn't actually have JMX enabled, and when I did suggest that maybe we turn on JMX and we enable those flags, well, that's got to go through the change board, and that doesn't meet again until next Wednesday, so that's out as well. Okay, let's have another workaround. Let's turn on X forwarding, and then we can launch these tools on the server but view them locally. So again, in PuTTY, you can just tick a box to enable X11 forwarding. With on the Linux command line, it's just -X. Great, Linux will understand that natively. On Windows, you need to download an extra tool like Xming if you want to view X Windows from there, but unfortunately the server that we were connecting to doesn't have an X server because it's just headless. They've never needed one before. So yeah, at this point, I thought, well, I just need to kind of stay calm, take a step back, reevaluate my options, and think, well, what other tools can I get along with? So again, let's start from the beginning. Let's view live data on the command line. So we don't have any graphs or any sort of nice tools like that, but what we can do is use built-in JDK tools. So this is always the first one that I start with, JPS. If any of you are familiar with Linux administration, you'll be very, very aware of the PS command, which just lists processes. JPS will just list Java processes. Very simple. The -v flag gives you the verbose output, so if you've got a ton of Java processes and just the name of each, it gives you the bit of extra information to know which one you're doing. So we can see here, process ID 31142 is my Tomcat instance, so that's the one that I want to do a bit more investigation on. Next up, we've got Jstat. So Jstat gives you a lot of really good information into garbage collection. There's different fields that you can set. This one I'm using here is GC cores, which is quite a nice one that I find, purely because the numbers that it gives you are percentages. So it tells you what percentage full that the heap is. Other ones will just give you numbers of heap usage in bytes or kilobytes. The number after the process ID, which is obviously what I used JPS for, 4000, that is the period in milliseconds that it will print out a new line. If you don't supply that, it'll just print out one line, and that's not massively useful. So the next thing, JMap. If you're not aware about this is the command which will give you a heap dump, which is obviously really useful if you think this looks a bit like a memory leak. Now, unfortunately, that's rarely something that goes down well on a customer site, purely because the best time to take a heap dump is when the heap is full. The time when the heap is full is almost certainly when the heap is being most used by your customers, and that's not the time where you want to introduce a minute or two's pause, which is sometimes what can happen. Next, we've got Jstat. Now, this is how we would just collect a thread dump other than kill -3, which is a Linux specific or Unix-like specific command. So Jstat would just print out a thread dump, every thread that's in the JVM, so we can see what's going on. And now you can see that I've used the double arrow to pipe that through to a file, which means create it if it doesn't exist, or append to it if it already does. So what that means is that instead of just having a single snapshot of what threads we're doing, I can take a couple over a period of seconds, maybe when I'm doing a particular test. So in this case, it was a login, start a login, and then just run that command a few times while the login is happening to say, okay, have we got one thread that's spending 20 odd seconds in the database, or 20 odd seconds trying to process some information or something, or waiting for another service or resource to become free. So that's really useful. Next thing, once we've finally managed to get some sort of live data, is to look at historical data. So maybe the issue isn't actually happening at the moment, so we need to look back and see, well, what data have you collected so far that's given us these things? Now, on this particular customer, that was nothing at all, because that's just who they were. But we do have quite a few options here. So best case scenario, really ideal thing that we can have would be, I would say, Mission Control's flight recorder. And this will give you all of the huge amount of detail and information that you get from Mission Control, but in a historical way. And you can actually configure it to run continuously, sort of like a ring buffer. So it will be a time-boxed period. So it will always retain just an hour, 2 hours, a full day of information, and it will just be the previous length of time. But unfortunately, it's not a free feature, so very often you'll find that the customer that you're working with just hasn't bought the commercial feature, so they're not allowed to use that in production, which is a shame because it's really good. So the alternative to that would be verbose GC, I would say. Generally, I would recommend that anyone uses verbose GC all the time in production. It's a really lightweight process, and it gives you a huge amount of information. It's really good. I really like it. We've got a tool like the one on the right there, which is GC Viewer, available on GitHub at the moment. So the company that made it don't support it anymore. But IBM do a really good one called Garbage Collection. It's GCMV is the acronym. I can't remember the full name. But the disadvantage is if you don't turn on verbose GC, well, you haven't got any data to work with. So I've already shown you how to collect some live data with Jstat. What we can do is kind of repurpose that, and as I did with the JStack, the thread dumps, piping that out to a file, I can do the same thing with Jstat. So use nohup to make sure that when my terminal session ends, it doesn't stop running. This will, every 4 seconds, print out the status of the heap to a file, which I can then analyze later with some kind of fancy Linux commands such as these. So there I'm using cat to just read in the file, then piping that through to sort. I'm sorting by key 6, which is the YGC column. Doing a -u to only select the unique ones, so that's basically only selecting the times when a garbage collection actually happened, which is only really the interesting ones. And then the -n to make sure it's sorted by number. Otherwise, it just sorts it alphabetically and everything goes a bit wonky. Then piping that into less so I can at least traverse it. Now, one thing that I should say about Jstat, which I forgot to mention earlier, is the column headings. You can see at the bottom, sort has ended up putting those right at the end. But these actually, for those of you that haven't already noticed, correspond to the same things that you would see in Visual VM's Visual GC plugin. So we've got S0, S1, E, O, and P. Those are all areas of the heap. Survivor 0 and Survivor 1. Then the Eden, then Old, and then PermGen. So what we can see is that for those two blue highlighted lines, that's the top one was a garbage collection, and we can see that the 4 in the FGC column, which is the count of full GCs that has happened, jumps up to 5. And then we can see that the cause for that was a system.gc call, which is generally not the sort of thing that you want to be doing yourself in code. So, finally, once we've gone through and we've collected some data, obviously we haven't done things in an ideal way. This is really not the sort of thing I would recommend doing. All of these have, or a lot of these have been last resorts. Obviously, ideally you want to go with the tools that work and do things in the best way. It's time to kind of bask in the glory of your own success because, well, despite huge amounts of problems, you've done it, you've collected some data, except that's only really the start, isn't it? So we collected data, then it's time to go into the analysis. So I hope you've come across something that's been a bit new, something that you can maybe take back to work and be a bit useful. So thank you for